It's natural for us to, at some extent, dislike each other or even hate each other, right? We've all seen it in ourselves and in others and throughout human history. Whether it's the hatred developed towards a national rival in the case of World War II, when the United States wrongfully imprisoned anybody of Japanese descent after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, or if it's the small or nerdy or geeky kid that is outcast and bullied and is exiled from the cool kids table. Maybe those same prisoners in World War II grew to hate their country and those that imprisoned them. Maybe the exiled kid grew to hate his bullies. You can see it in how our political parties try to turn us against each other, just because we may differ in political belief. Hatred seems to have become the norm at some point throughout history. Even though all of us would recognize hatred as a cancer, only bringing destruction and hurt. Moses tells us in Genesis 4 about Adam and Eve's first descendants, Cain and Abel. In this story, we see the heart of both Cain and Abel. Abel wants to draw closer to God, freely giving what God first allowed Abel to receive. However, Cain has a different attitude. Cain, instead of freely wanting to give, Cain gives out of obligation, looking not to appease God, but to be better than his brother in God's eyes. This sibling rivalry turns into a deep-seated hatred within Cain's heart. Cain allows this hatred to fester and grow within him, even to the extent to where God warns Cain. Sin is crouching at the door. Instead of changing his ways and preventing that anger and that hatred from building up and dealing with that part of himself, Cain allows that to grow until he ultimately commits the first act of murder by killing his brother Abel. God then confronts Cain and separates him from the rest of his family, except for his wife. And then Cain, now marked by God for what he's done, has to go and live out the rest of his life, starting a completely new society, away from everybody else. Much like God's warning to Cain, Jesus tells us where sin begins. Matthew, a disciple and an apostle of Jesus, records him saying, "You have heard that it was said of those of old, 'You shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment.' But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. And you have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart." So it seems that sin is not simply just the action of murder or adultery or lying or covetousness, but it begins when we contemplate on those actions, allowing those thoughts and those feelings to grow within ourselves. So to return to the original question, is it natural to hate? And for that matter, is it natural to lust? And is it natural to be jealous of others? Unfortunately, the answer is yes. Due to our fallen nature and the sinful world around us, it's completely natural for us to begin to grow such desires. However, when we allow those desires to go unchecked, it gives room for those desires to grow and grow until those desires give birth to action. And those desires and those actions bring only destruction to our life and the lives of those around us. Paul, an apostle of Jesus, states it this way in his letter to the Galatians: a little leaven or yeast leavens the entire lump. So if it's natural to develop these desires, but destructive to allow those desires to grow and to contemplate on the actions that those desires lead to, what's the answer then? Paul once again helps us out as he writes this to his disciple Titus whenever he writes this letter to him. By the washing of the regeneration and renewal of the Holy Spirit, through the sacrifice of Jesus Christ on the cross, we are saved. And when we accept that salvation, God gives us the Holy Spirit. And this Holy Spirit brings with it this act of sanctification and regeneration. And this is the renewal that Paul talks about. This regeneration and renewal takes time. It's the resetting of our heart to the way God intended, his factory defaults, if you will. Free of these evil thoughts and desires that bring only destruction. Submit yourselves to God, and he will begin this process of renewal and regeneration within your own life. As James, the brother of Jesus, states, submit yourselves then to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. May I challenge you that if you haven't already submitted yourself to God, that you take the chance now to do that. And if you have submitted yourself to God, I challenge you to examine your own life and the changes that God's made in your life. And I challenge you that even though you may have said the words, or you may have walked up in front of a church, you may have been baptized, to search yourself and see, are you truly submitting yourself to God? Are you allowing God to do that work inside of you? If you're not, I challenge you to humble yourself before God and allow God to clean up all the dirt and grime within your life and within your heart. May God keep you and bless you. Really quick, before you go, let me explain why I felt led to start this channel. When talking to Pilate, Jesus said, I have come into the world to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. Pilate responds by asking, what is the truth? It's evident that a lot of people are still asking this question almost 2,000 years later. And while we live in an amazing time with the wealth of the world's knowledge available in the palm of our hands, there's often too much information, leaving people unable to process what's true and what's not true. Paul describes such times in this way when he writes his second letter to his disciple Timothy. Always learning and never able to arrive at a knowledge of the truth. There are several who expound on what truth is, but often they are misguided, or they are malice in their intent, or they're being intellectually dishonest. My hope is that I am able to provide evidence for why the scriptural narrative is true, a contextual and practical explanation of the principles found in its writings, and a defense for other believers. As Peter explains, you should always be prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect. If you find value in this channel as I do, there are a few ways you can help, both by gifting and without spending any money. First, react and interact with these videos wherever you're watching from. This greatly helps the channel be seen by others and new people. Next, please share this content with others you feel may benefit from the information found here. Also, please subscribe to this channel on all social media. And finally, if you feel led to, and if you have the means to, please consider giving to this channel through the outlets previously mentioned, or the channel's Patreon. All these links are going to be in the video description. Thank you for watching, and may God keep you and bless you.